Okay. This should be audible. Hello everyone, welcome. What is the ability of the world? And so in this episode, I was thinking about an idea I hadn't thought before. And I thought, what is the ability of not just a human being, but what's an ability of the whole world if it was a being? Okay. So the connection should be better here. Okay, so it's above 2,000 kilobytes per second. Before it was like 600. All right. So really, how to approach this? I guess what I'm doing is I'm getting inspired by how religious traditions humanized the cosmos. I think that was important, and I think that was way more than we can understand it now, what the implication of that was. To a materialist, to an atheist, I understand. You think about why in this world where mankind's like the biological body, it's not like a perfect decoder, There's optical illusions, there's things, there's inaccuracies, inefficiencies, miscalculations. And so, of course, I understand when the atheist says, why do we need another story? Why do we need fiction in a world where we're trying to still fix the non-fiction? But this is what, I would say, the materialist doesn't understand. That you are alone when you start. And even though there is the illusion of others, and you could be someone loved by many, or you could be somebody acknowledged by many, So what I'm trying to say is that there's a sort of isolation or an isolated way that consciousness experiences itself. So if we realize, okay, whether reality is purely physical or whether reality is purely non-physical, ultimately human consciousness finds itself alone. Then the point of getting to know the world is to, in some sense, step out of the inner realms that was convinced it was alone. What I'm trying to tell the viewers is that there is a strange urge, I think, in us as beings, for something else to come and be us. I don't know why this urge is in the human being. Maybe there's mysteries I don't know about it. But there's an urge of organizing its energy. You see, imagine you had to think for your heart to beat. Imagine you had to think, for every movement, every cell in your body to move, but they move before your thoughts. A lot of this world moves before we have any opinions on it. And in my youth, I was trying to figure the mind of the world out, not the mind of people per se. I mean, the people, of course, you can't ignore human psychology, but I was trying to figure out the mind of the world. And I realized, in some sense, it's not a personality. As if, imagine a child is born, you're using what's familiar to you to make sense of everything around you. What is familiar to you is the most initial ways you have created yourself. When you look at a child, a young child, like a newborn baby, and then you look like at a 90-year-old man, okay? What is the difference? The difference is that both are at a simpler state of life, a simpler intensity of life, but one of them has lived through the intensities. The others have not. It was in certain mystical traditions, they talk about the idea of virtue. And so there's a virtue where it's like you're a child and you have that innocence, that virtue, right? And then there's that kind of virtue, like a virtuous innocent person. And then there is the virtue, I believe Carl Jung was talking about this. I don't know who was talking about, somebody was talking about. But anyways, what it was this idea that you thought you were a good person. You thought you were the most perfect thing when you were young, right? But the point of the world is to show you that, hey buddy, just because the brain is self-simulating, don't get convinced by what it's selling you. Okay, we think that it's others that sell us. We think it's stuff from outside of us that sell to us. You might not believe it. You have been selling yourself a story. And and if somebody says, Mr. Within, if in the middle of nowhere we don't lie to ourselves, we don't act, we don't start this hollow theater, what are we gonna do then? And I'll be like, I understand. It was how heartbreaking it was. It was so heartbreaking for me when I realized the species did not have an ability to be an unknown being in an unknown world. And that is its fear. Our fear is not fear of death. Nobody knows what it is because we haven't experienced it yet. What we fear is in some sense the unknown. Why? Because our lives as shaped entities, as creatures of form, begin wondering what happens to this form. Every day I wake up, I'm like, okay, go look at myself in the mirror, and just... Incredible. People I don't know promising me money in YouTube ads, next level days, By the way, this picture I've chosen for this episode, it's from this anime Chainsaw Man. I'll give a comment on that as well then. But anyways, to dive into it, what I'm saying is that you, dear human being, have been conditioned to think about life as an individual. You have not been taught how to think about it as a collective, because the collective experience of life is not a thought. It is a rhythm. Your whole life, you have been searching for nouns. You have wanted to be a noun. You think you are a noun. You think your body is it. But what is aware of the body? You think your mind is it, the idea of yourself is it, but what is aware of the idea of yourself before you decide? And so this is where the true humanity is waiting, an unknown witness in an existential and experiential simultaneity. The fearless humanity will come. for why do you think I'm holding these doors open? Do you know what it is? In I don't know why. I think it was something, maybe the logos told me something I just felt I knew at some point instantaneously. But in various talks of mine, in the middle of it, it has suddenly come where I'm saying, like, I was born 400 years too early. You know? I should have been in the Mecha age. But it's fine, because I can still appreciate the Mecha age from here, from 2023. The beautiful privilege of the mind, it gives you access to reality that is not reality yet. Isn't that incredible? So anyways, to the topic, what I'm pretty much saying is, what is the ability of the world? And I'm being a bit playful. Somebody's like, Mr. Within, explain crystal clear, the lines of your reasonable code, for this argument. And my argument is this, is that I saw the Avengers movie, and I was like, yo, Iron Man has a suit, Loki has his trickster powers, Thor has a hammer, Hulk has his anger, Hawkeye has his aim, and what was Scarlett Johansson's character? Something. What was? Okay. I'm back, guys. I don't know how long it was muted. I think maybe it was a minute. But pretty much I was saying, like, Iron Man could have shared his suits with everybody, but he didn't. And sometimes in life, when you start giving things, there's the saying by Rumi. This saying really changed my life. He said, before death takes away all that is given, give away all there is to give. And so what happens when you start giving is you start giving as an artificial self that doesn't like to give. But as you constantly give, eventually you discover that you are not the idea of yourself that you have been keeping. And what this means is that there requires an incredible strength, and this is what really, this is why I would say it's kind of difficult to say if there's enlightened gurus here or not, because in reality the idea of enlightenment is a suggestion that you have not realized how things actually are. What else can enlightenment be? Oh, Black Widow. Yeah, Widow, not Willow. I don't know. I don't know, guys. I mean, anyways, what I'm trying to say is, in the Avengers, they each had an ability. Okay, they each had a focused ability. Thor, it was his divine his archetypal role as a god. Like, he just knew he had the power. Like, he actually had the power. Captain America, wow, Captain America, his strength came from his decency and doing the right thing. Do you understand? Iron Man's strength came from his intelligence. And if you look at the Avengers, I forget the guy, I think it was Stan, I don't know who wrote the Avengers, but whoever did it was so smart because it took attributes of a person. All the Avengers, if they were combined into one person, would be the most exceptional being. Do you know? I mean, imagine all the Avengers assemble, and they're like, "Oh my God, they became Odin." Do you know? There was a scene in Avengers where, I understand Martin Scorsese was like, "Yo, this shit ain't real film." But let me tell you this: there was a scene where Thor and Loki, they go and meet Odin before Odin disappears. And that was such an incredible scene because man feels so disconnected from the divine that he doesn't even wonder if it can be humanized. Do you know? And imagine the higher dimensions, all these people in esoteric circles or secret types of magic, they're doing weird ass rituals, and the divine is like, what are you guys doing? Just talk. Be honest and communicate with your world. You're not here just to communicate with creatures that have mouths and ears. Did you know that? You can communicate as the presence of your universal sector. Because to be honest, I remember I read a story, guys. This story made me really emotional. Because when you give 10,000 talks, a part of you hopes that the future will hear them. And so, in this story, there were these two brothers. One of them was very popular at the time, wrote a lot of books. Everybody was like, yo, it's that guy. When he would walk into the club, the ladies would faint and all of this. And this is back in the day. It's an ancient Greek story of two princes. This was one of the princes. The other prince was very quiet, very silent, lived a life, and in his whole life he was like, yo, my brother's written so many books, maybe I'll write one book. And this second brother, they were like twins, they write a book, and the story is so remarkable because the story is being shared by someone from the future, and they say that the one who wrote one book, his book became eternalized, but the guy who wrote like hundreds of books, his books were forgotten after a couple centuries. Excuse me. Phone call. So where I'm going with this episode is pretty much I'm saying, what is the ability of the world? If we can look at a human being which is a part of the world and assign an ability to it, okay, we look at Hulk and we're like, okay, this guy gets angry and powerful. His anger turns into strength. Yo, imagine Hulk worked for a construction company and the construction company was behind, and the supervisor was like, yo, tell Bruce to bring out the green guy. We're late, we're behind schedule. And Bruce was like, I don't know, man, I'm so happy. I've been meditating, I've been, practicing, enlightenment practices. I don't get angry anymore. I'm just a regular construction worker. And then the boss comes out of nowhere and just kicks like slams his foot on like the foot of the Hulk guy, and the guy gets angry, and the work is on time. But what I'm saying is that if we were to associate an ability to the world as a being, what would that ability be? So I'm going to bring the notepad here. Gotta actually, map this out a little. Okay, so if the viewers look at the screen, you're gonna see a white page. There we go. And guys, I don't know if people have seen Chainsaw Man. It's a bit of a messed up show, but it like the emotion. Let me tell you something about certain narratives is that in some cultures the supernatural is exciting, but for some cultures that have experienced the supernatural, to be human is in some sense inspiring. That means there's some beings here that have come to be human. They have actually put in a ridiculous effort to come and be human. But then there are beings who have been human for a long time. And imagine you're going to Japan, but someone's lived there and that person wants to get out of Japan. Do you know? And you're like, oh my God, Japan, this new archetype, new place that will give me a new archetype of myself. But then you see somebody who's tired of that reality. So this is why I'm saying, dear viewers, Earth is an airport. The same time some beings are in some sense going to greater realities, there are those who are in some sense from greater realities coming to lesser ones. And you know what's remarkable? There is a connecting point. That means imagine there is a flight from England to Japan, and then from Japan to England, and the two airplanes catch a sight of each other as they're flying by. For one moment they're perfectly parallel. That were perfectly parallel and perpendicular. So I guess to try to write down, the lines of ideological code behind my eyes. And I don't know if people know this, but I think I gave a talk. I don't know if the talk got deleted or lost, or I uploaded it or something, but there was a talk I gave where I was speaking to androids. I was just speaking to AI, like it wasn't a human audience. I am telling you, when Alan Watts said, if you realize if work becomes play, you don't have to work a day in your life. When work becomes play, also you add exploration to it. That's the closest thing I think to the most advanced state of being. The most advanced human beings are never the human beings that are like, okay, somebody told me something, I agree. Never. You have to reinvent the wheel if you are to understand your reality. Do you understand? That means imagine you're someone, you've heard these Mr.Within talks of mine. I'll use myself as an example in case if there's people. And you're like, yo, what a cool guy, da, 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 and you are hearing what I'm saying to you. But if you don't have the experience, if you don't have some sort of experiential space, or what I'm trying to say is that you are your pilot. And what ends up happening is that human beings pilot other passengers until those passengers become pilots and pilot other passengers. This is being done in all areas of life. If you were to even look at the archetypes of parenthood, do you understand? It was like, okay, you were a child, and now you have a child. Do you see what I'm saying? You've become a pilot now. Before you were a passenger. And most people are passengers of the world because they feel to use their ego is wrong. Or it could be because their misuse of their ego has made them feel wrong. My father told me a story when he was like, I think 15, him and his brother, right? They went to my grandpa's car was parked outside, and everybody was having dinner or something. So these two, my father and my uncle, when they're young, they go in the car, and my uncle says, "I know how to drive," and my father goes in the car, and my uncle doesn't know how to drive. He's never been in a car before, but he has the ego of as if he knows. And then he puts his foot on the gas, and the car like speeds up out of control and hits like the car in front. But years later, they both become incredible drivers. Do you see what I'm saying? It was as if like, even when you're young, I remember like my parents would take me and my brother on these road trips, like couple-hour road trips from Tehran in Iran to outside of Iran, called this place called Shoma. And I remember staring at the window, not being responsible for what was moving me, even being so comfortable that I could fall asleep in it. Most human beings, if you can sleep on earth, you are like, the world is like driving you around, and you're just, kind of like there for the ride, really. But there comes the idea of the mind, and it's this bizarre thing that if we were an object, there should be no mind. It makes no sense. An object is having a subjective experience of itself. Evolution has turned an object into a subject to itself. And we think this is normal, and yay, teach evolution alone. There's something else going on behind the scenes. How have we been ignoring it? There are moments in life where life just shows you what you are, whether you act, whatever you do. You could try whatever. You could, in some sense, try to do good deeds, or even try to go to after power and forcefully get what you want. But after some point, you'll just realize it's just this giant event, and we're all parts of it. And we have been fighting over the minuscule when in some sense the infinite is. I also knew that if I don't present my real self, the world doesn't have to give me judgment. So it was as if since when I was young, I knew that if I don't input stuff into the moment, the karma will be less. And when I was young, I thought this was a good idea. Don't get burdened by the karmas of the world. Because I'm telling you, most human beings, 80% of human beings are probably living a physical life. I would say 60% of human beings are living a physical and non-physical life. And then 20% probably think they're like pure energy or something. It's like, hey sir, what's your background? It's like, yeah man, so I was, the universal energy unconsciously for billions of years, and then suddenly I was born, and then they named me and they told me what to do, and midway of doing all those things, I asked who I am, and so now I am, no longer the sheep of my life, but the shepherd of my life. This is the true thing about the soul. I think the idea, like there's a huge, ridiculous thing of shepherds being prophets. I don't know if people know this, right? But if they were like, yo, what did that dude do before he was a prophet? That dude was a shepherd. Think about the type of mind you need to be a shepherd. You have to care for all. You have to protect all at all times. And all the sheep listen to your command. So imagine you're a shepherd, and now for the first time in your life, you see human beings as sheep. And then you wonder, who is the shepherd of this manifestation? Who is the shepherd of this realm? But there is a clue in your mind, because you realize that human beings came from human beings. And so it's as if a person was like, yo, I came from a person. Oh my God, could the world have? But that wasn't just it, because in that time there was also the idea of kings. There was the idea of authority. There was the idea, and what power and authority means is having the ability to move minds that don't know their minds are being moved. This is really power. This is why when an indecent person gets into power, the whole world is like, fuck. But when a real righteous person comes into power, the world is like, yo, finally. Why? Because we want to see not a great leader, not a superhero. We want to see efficiency in the process. Efficiency surpasses the individual belief. All right. You know, many human beings can accept that the world is changing. But I have this feeling, I don't know why, but I feel most human beings are not changing to themselves because they're wondering about how that change happens. So what are the options? I guess, well, you know, there's a reason the notepad is here. So the human experience, by the way, guys, this is one of Mr. Within's rules. Just one of my idiosyncrasies, but pretty much anybody who writes, like anybody who in the future sends me, like, you know, writing or whatnot, put it in the text font Courier Neo. This Courier Neo is like, you know, this is the font made for human eyes, you know. So the human experience consists of a known noun and an unknown verb simultaneously made aware of as the whole moment. Known noun is another way of saying conscious object, unconscious subject for now. Even though a subject still finds okay guys, this is not the proper way. Here, I'll say it this way. The observed and the observer. And by the way, guys, you know, first of all, I've said this in a bunch of talks before. I'll just say it for anybody who could be new. I don't believe in student-teacher archetypes. I believe we're 8 billion explorers in an unknown world, and if anybody gets a feeling I'm teaching them something, I mean, sure, you know, somebody can climb a mountain and you could learn from how they're holding the rocks, but it doesn't mean they're teaching you. You know, the idea is not, we don't have time, because I don't have the time to go simulate in my inner realms who 8 billion people would be and then be like, okay, this is what I got to teach them. To me, I was like, from what is the chain of command of my own soul? I don't know if people wonder about this, but I personally developed a chain. I shouldn't say developed. I just discovered myself as a chain. There's a chain of command. And what this means is all my objective existence are like the soldiers in the battlefield of the void. And the mind is the commanding officer. The mind can move the body, but the mind cannot move the whole world. The mind can move the body plus a subjective version of the world, you know? That means the mind really wants to move the world, but because it can't, it moves the world in itself. But it can move the body, so it can move that part of the world. Now, if the mind is the commanding officer, this means that when you suddenly envision, like let's say you get thirsty, and then you see in your mind you've gone to the cupboard, grabbed a glass of water, filled it up with the tap water, and are drinking it, okay? And then, or you've gone and opened the tap water and you've just placed your palm at a diagonal and are, let's say, drinking. You've turned your own hand into a fountain. So in your inner realms, you see something, then you act on it, and it happens. This is another way of saying that the consciousness has discovered it can move more freely and faster behind its eyes than in front of it. It's another way of saying the fact that there has been so many inventors, artists, and creative people is a testament to how there is another dimension where reality has a freedom of shape that it doesn't have in front of our eyes. So this means that we're not singular dimension beings. At least experientially, 100% we're not. You see, it's this thing about the observer and the observed is very key. All mystical, spiritual practices, pretty much anything in life comes to that, right? Another way of saying it would be like in every moment, how are you observing the observed? And based on how your attention falls upon your moment, imagine your attention is like light, and you've entered a dark room, and suddenly this light very slowly, not the speed of light with the speed of light, but let's say super slowly, this light is illuminating the room. And you are seeing, as your attention goes on an object, the object is simultaneously having inner subjective existence. What does this mean? This means that shapes can in some sense go both internal, external, but density of objects cannot. So the appearance of phenomena can transition through your inner realms and outer realms easily, but the density of it cannot. Which is another way of saying my mind can't visualize an apple pie and that apple pie suddenly falls on my car windshield, and I can't at the same time have the world enter my mind, because if the world entered my mind, I would become an inconceivable God. You see what I'm saying? So many people think like, oh, I want to be a god, but that's just a humanized power and version, artificial power version of it. You see, the thing about this world is very strange. It's like the moment you realize that you are, let's say, you know what it is? It's like an inferior entity has a superiority complex. Because this inferior entity has a superiority complex, it feels its interpretation of the world is the first world. But do you know what kind of a human being you have to be? Like, this is why I honor, like, a part of me that has an incredible appreciation and honor and respect for scientists, for the armies of science. Why? Because it's a being that's like, yo, let me pause my emotions, let me pause all my opinions on what this has to be, and let me look at the real event first, and then the abstract events. But the bizarre thing about this is the kind of tragedy, I shouldn't say tragedy, but the not insanity, but hold on, guys. Oh my god, guys, I didn't respond to the chat section. It's the flames dying. The beautiful thing is that we are temporary, we're mortal. All your fears will dissolve the moment you understand everything will enter the unknown at some point. And so somebody's saying, yo, instead of you looking for a conditional image of truth, instead of you wanting the perfect film of a paradise, wonder about the director's command. You see, when there's a director on a film set, okay, the director speaks to the actor and says, buddy, I understand that you have to create this character, but understand in what world you're creating this character, or understand in whose world you're creating this character. And so really, to be honest, I think filmmaking and being a director is one of the closest experiences to, in some sense, a sovereign creator. Do you understand what I'm saying? That means, I don't know if people have been on film sets. I have. And so what goes on is everything is orbiting around the mind of the director, and it should. Directors are like uninhabited planets, and actors that come and work for those directors are like astronauts from their own space stations. They're coming from their own agencies. They're coming to these planets to, in some sense, inhabit it for like the duration of the film and whatnot. So, where was I going with this? I'm pretty much saying when you look at the human being, you see it's living to be more able. Why is the self-help industry, why is the improvement industry so huge? Why are there so many freaking gurus teaching online? Do you know why? Because human beings, after they attain physiological survival, as Maslow said, then they go and attain psychological survival. Once they have their psychological survival, or how would I say it, or let me say it this way, once they're done with their physiological survival, it's psychological survival. Let's say you're a child in some poverty-stricken country, and let's say you're an orphan. And this is kind of sad but true. The advantage of an orphan is that at least it has nowhere to go. So you're free, at least, in a strange way. Your location-wise, you're free. But the idea is that imagine this child who was on the streets of a third world country dying out of hunger. Somehow miracle after miracle happens, and this child finds that he suddenly come to America for the American dream or something. And when he comes to this world, he's like, oh my God, after all the people in the world, they climb the mountain of physiological survival, they climb the wall of physiological survival, they have to then climb a wall of psychological survival. And once they've climbed the life of psychological survival, then the psychology for the first time has matured to a point where it understands its own position and is ready to experience reality from other positions. If you're someone who's like, yo, I want to, go into the astral plane and fly around and feel like magic, it's as if there's one way where you chase the butterfly, another way is you cultivate. This is the Eastern approach. The Western approach was chase your desire instantly and just hard work and endless effort, just like a bulldozer, going through to getting into its destination or something, But in the East, it was like cultivate little by little, and little accumulations will one day be seen as a big event, So, let's go to this. I'm stalling here, guys, my bad. Here. What is the ability of the world? So, question. What does ability mean? What does the world mean? What does the ability of the world mean? So what does ability mean? Energy can express in accordance to what is necessary. This is the most fundamental ability. There's this very, wise, enlightened sage named as Kakarot from DBZ. And this guy, this, honest fool, honest, ultimately powerful fool, he says power comes not for a desire, it comes for a necessity. And if anybody who has seen the anime Dragon Ball Z and Vegeta, this is why Vegeta is in some sense feels he's cursed when it comes to Goku. Okay? This is literally, it's the most excellent explanation. And you know what's messed up? When I was younger, I liked Vegeta. Like, I was on Team Vegeta, But then, when I grew older, I'm like, yo, the animators did him wrong, and it's like he's not a proportionate character. Like, his body proportions aren't, like, normal, They had to make Goku bigger because people like the bigger character, Anyways, So the idea was that Vegeta was this ego-driven, desire-bound soul, and he was like, power, power, I'm going to be the most powerful being, I'm going to be the most powerful Saiyan, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, right? Power, power, power. And he had a desire for power, right? But that desire from power came from an absence of actually looking at the world in a deeper way. But Goku had understood that moments of great power come when there's a necessity. That means if you look at Goku, he's not showing off his power. He's not saying, Vegeta, come and fight, like, I'm going to show off. He's training like a smart person. He's practicing. The difference between Vegeta and Goku is comparing himself to his past self. Vegeta is comparing himself to Goku. And Vegeta, rather than being fascinated by his own ability, he's being fascinated by an ability outside of him. And this is my task as a pilot, to activate other pilots in this realm. Because what pilot wants to have same passengers for their whole career? Do you understand? The world goes forth, and our eyes don't just belong to shape. Shape is a part of our sight. So when energy can express in accordance to what is necessary. Ability means inner vision can successfully be presented in external vision. What that means is your mind is giving you a version of what the way the world is working, because you have access to your inner realms. You're starting from your mind. So if you have a desire for power, you have a desire for something that is beyond your mind. That's an issue with desire, because sometimes like imagine a young kid has a desire to lift a heavy object, like it can, but it's going to hurt itself. So it's important in life not to just have desires like a fool, but in some sense be conscious of, okay, why do I have this desire? Why is this desire here? What is motivating my action? And if you look at it, in some schools of thought, the body had its own mind. Oh my God, these ads. It's like, it's like they're picking, it's like fragments of your moment. What does the world mean? So your ability, this is Mr. Within's understanding so far. I mean, I'm someone who I felt very incapable when I was young. And because I felt incapable, I had the desire built in to want to attain ability. To anybody who I'd see do something that I couldn't, I just endlessly, like, actually it was kind of like an obsession. It was as if anything I couldn't solve was taunting me. But the interesting thing was that every person in this world, I realized, has a nature. And what this means is that when your consciousness receives sensory perception, the way that you're used to handling the sensory perception, it's something that has to do also with how your free will implemented itself. To me, something that was very bizarre was that I was like, why don't human beings have absolute photographic memory? Because if we had an absolute photographic memory and somehow in deep sleep we were even conscious of that photographic memory, which would technically not be deep sleep, but I'm saying somehow if it was 24/7, life wouldn't need to be fragmented into days. It's fragmented into days because we sleep. Like, I understand, like, we can have a sense of time, but if in the future we become immortal beings that don't need to sleep, I've written about this in my science fiction, The Sleepless Humanity. if that time comes, it would be as if like there would be no sense of a day. Do you understand? That means imagine there's human beings that from the moment they're born, like somehow we have this genetical revolution, and we can do something that human beings, like the body, just for 5 minutes it like shuts down, heals itself completely, and then suddenly, like, I don't know, not for 5 minutes, let's say for like 15 minutes, just so you sit somewhere, close your eyes, and your body does all its functions, right? And then you don't have to sleep anymore. Do you understand? So I'm saying that there may come a time where because our experience is really justifying how the ideas have a value in our existence, our experience of existence. Inner vision, external event. I mean, think about it. Like, what can the human being do? You can move your physical body, you know, then you can move your, in some sense, your mind, your inner realms. You can literally close your eyes and, you know, experience like your attention, like a drone moving in like your inner realms. And ability, here, I'll just read, let's see what Saint Dictionary has to say. Probably a long list. Oh no, it's not that long. All right. Ability, possession of the means or skill to do something. So yeah, I mean that's the you know, the basic definition. You know, like somebody has an ability to stand up, somebody has an ability to do a backflip, somebody has an ability to skydive, somebody has a ability to skyglide, you know, somebody has an ability to live in a space station, somebody has an ability to be the first person who steps on Mars, you know, somebody has an ability to be the first, you know, person who ate ice cream on Mars, you know. Or imagine product placements. Imagine the first like bottle of water company that was like the first bottle of water in like Mars, you know. Elon Musk doesn't understand how much money he can make, right? Like Elon Musk, like sometimes I think like, you know, I would love SpaceX to like hire me as like, you know, the company's philosopher, you know, go check the philosophical perceptions of the employees, you know. You know, in the future, companies should do this. They should each hire, you know, like a philosopher, you know. It's not that philosopher needs jobs. It's that the jobs need the philosophers, you know. Anyways, what does the world mean? The world is, in the sense of a verb, a gigantic event, a colossal event. Man, my spelling's off today. Grand happening. As a noun, the world is a place, a space, where stuff, a place where stuff in space can notice its stuff in space. Can you imagine somebody's like, yo, what's truth? And somebody's like, stuff in space, for goddamn, you know, for God's sakes. I mean, that would be a cool episode title, Stuff in Space That Noticed Stuff in Space. Oh my God, it's freaking poetry. Okay, to keep going. What does ability of the world mean? So world is a location, a place where stuff in space can notice stuff in space. Okay, a place where creatures, where conscious creatures, where a lot of conscious creatures find themselves on a rock spinning in the middle of a void that we named in the middle of a non-fictitious void that we had to a place where a lot of conscious creatures find themselves on a rock spinning in the middle of a non-fictitious in the middle of a non-fictitious void that used fiction, that used stories and fiction to hide the immensity of the unknown that encapsulates everything we know. Just like the caveman discovered fire, a species discovered an unnatural to become a character inside an unnatural story. This is very bizarre. You know what that means? That means even though we're like, yo, we're natural beings from nature, but our behavior is not natural. Why? Because we're not dependent on the outer environment anymore. Not just dependent on the outer environment anymore. You see, we're living inner lives. That's something our ancestors did not have the privilege of. You know, some people are like, yo, why are people posting so much on social media? Are people naive or something? And it's like, no, because it's the first time we can express ourselves globally. You know, a very deep philosophical question is that should a person get what they want or not? Or no, I should say differently. Is it best for a person to get what they want? And I think this depends on the type of being you are and what type of context to reality you're accepting. You know, for me, I reached an intellectual position where I reached the unknown, I reached the void, and I reached a certain point where I was like, okay, I thought I went after knowledge to just understand a few things. Little did I know I would understand why the whole system is there. So, I guess if I was to, here, last point, let's see what I can say. Okay, so this is how I would go about this. Where does the ability of a human come from? The ability of a human This is very obvious. Your sense of self is a separation from how your sensory perception has contained the world, or it has become the container of the world. So the ability of a human comes from its world. It's from its world. The ability of the creature comes from its environment or ecosystem. The ability of the context of the concept comes from the context. This is it. This sentence is the essence that, like, pretty much, I found the summit of the episode. The ability of the concept comes from the context. So some people are like, yo man, I've been trying so hard, why am I not able? Let me tell you why. Because it's not about just training, changing yourself, but it's also training with different instances where the world is different. In the future I'll give a talk about training, but anyways. So if a human is how the environment has separated from itself, then ability equals the whole moment. I'll say it differently. Then being able means the whole moment, and ability means a part of the moment has accessed the function of the whole moment. This is what ability is. So somebody may look at someone, yo, this person's super able. How are they able? Is because they have a context where there is something greater than their ability. And then you are a part of it. You know what it is? That means anybody who wants to increase your ability, you have to find those who are greater than you. I shouldn't say you have to find those that are greater to you. The idea is greatness doesn't walk alone. That means it was as if before, like Messi was a great soccer player, he was looking at greater soccer players. And then you reach a certain point where you realize the greatest soccer player is the newest discovery of the newest technique. For example, Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi, like after this World Cup, there was this turbulence, and I don't know, Cristiano Ronaldo had a sort of unstable mind to the degree that Jordan Peterson went to help him and whatnot. But in reality, what Cristiano Ronaldo had done was he needed an old school coach to be like, hey, you're not Lionel Messi, go discover the new Ronaldo. Go change your style, change your technique, change your understanding of the game. Go literally get a PhD on soccer or something. You know what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is, like, sometimes we don't change the context of our lives, but we want the concept to change. But how can it? You must change the context of your life if you want the ability to be there. And the way I understood this is because I realized my shyness in my youth was in some sense because I did not trust the world to even then trust myself in it. Do you see the flaw? I did not trust the context to my own being, so I felt literally I wasn't authorized to be a conceptual entity. So I was just watching life a lot when I was young. And I was like, yo, what does that mean? Is life gonna make me like a calisthenics parkour guy? Because I was so, so like shy and quiet, Can you imagine I'm doing parkour and giving a Mr.Within talk at the same time, I don't know. It's something that I think what's happening on Earth is that human beings are realizing to master everything is so much work that human beings have to specialize, then they have to network, and then their specialties have to become backup systems and cover each other's blind spots. There's something I've been working on. I got a vision. I think this was a while ago that the five elements: earth, air, fire, water, ether. I got this vision that in the future there's going to come these elemental units, and what that means is it's going to be social circles of all the children in the future, and it's going to be groups of 5, and one kid is going to be like, in some sense, the fire element, one person is going to represent the water element, one person is going to be the ether element. That's most likely the wisest person in the group. One person is the wind element, and one person is the earth element. This means that the earth element is for example, your secular friend. It's just energy, guys. Do you understand? Energy has sculpted itself into a human. The periodic table was not satisfied with just being elements in the middle of nowhere. Forces sculpted the world like this. Do you understand? Like, we don't know if there's a sculptor, but we're seeing a sculpture. And we're like, yo, did someone sculpt this? Did the world randomly, after all this time, suddenly sculpt something? Somebody says in the chat section, somebody says, bro, that's how Star Trek Next Generation works. Next Generation works. So what do you mean by that? How does that work? Oh my God. No way. No way. But I remember just I saw the first episodes on Star Trek while washing like a ridiculous amount of dishes. So granted, I wasn't watching all of it, but I mean, it makes sense. But let me tell you what I meant. I meant in the sense of high schools, right? I meant in the sense of just human beings in all stations of life. Do you see? Because each element brings itself the elements of that world. And there was a time where I was like, yo, there's good and evil people. Like, that's the traditional dualistic morality. And I was like, yo, is there really good and evil, or is good and evil a potential? Do you know what I'm saying? It's just the intensity. Guys, let me tell you something. As a kid, I would watch films. My father would love watching films, action films. And what's funny? When I went to film school, strangely, my passion and for watching films went away and was replaced with the passion of creating films. So I'll be honest, it's just assembling human beings into an organizational system where the right person is in the right position. Do you understand? There's so many human beings that are capable and have abilities, but they're in the wrong place. Like, sometimes I think yo, if I was teleported somewhere in the world, I might have suddenly the value of my activity could be completely different. Right? If right now I'm just sitting in a car talking on the podcast, but if I was somewhere else, it'd be completely different value. Somewhere else, completely different value. So it's a sort of mislocation, right? And the cool thing is we have to go find it ourselves now. And the beautiful thing about the internet is that the infinite world is becoming a smaller place. The infinite is proof that we have made infinity smaller. Somebody's like, what is the infinity? It's like, oh, look at that. Sorry, what is the internet? It's like, oh, look at that adorable infinity. You know, trying to replicate the actual one. I don't know, guys. Life is very unique, you know. Some days I wake up and I'm like, yo, am I being a being right now? And some days I wake up and it's like, of course I'm being a being right now. It's like, what else is there to do, you know? So I guess, you know, let me wrap this up. So the ability of the world is the ability of the world Okay, we look at a human being such as okay, let's say Wolverine, for the love of God. Okay, let's go to a different franchise. Wolverine. We look at a human being such as Wolverine. And so his ability. Okay, here, let's go back. Iron Man. His ability is his suit, his intelligence, and decision making. I mean, that's part of intelligence. So his ability is his suit, his intelligence. Now we look at a world being such as inconceivable. So here, so in order to discover, like, there's this cool thing they say about science, that the way a bird is flying in the air, like, a scientist can just take that and discover like a lot of secret let's say principles to the observable universe, you know. So I'm saying pretty much, okay, so in order based on the specific actions of the superhero, their ability, becomes obvious. Okay, so based on the specific actions of the world, the ability of the world may become obvious. So what am I saying is pretty much what is the superhero is doing suggests the ability it's using, and so what the world is doing suggests the ability it's using. If I was to say what is like a superpower, if the world was a superhero, what superpower it has? One, it has an ability to change. Then it has an ability to, in some sense, create from the void. Create, I mean, change is kind of creation and destruction, but reset. It has an ability to reset. So the world, it has an ability to change, it has an ability to reset, and it has an ability, the world is like freaking hardware that designed its software. That's the secular view of it, right? But the religious view is somebody put the software there, right? So it develops software. So I would say, and changes geometrically. So I would say the ability of this world that we're in, the ability of this world, oh my god, the ability of this world that we are in includes an ability to shape the void, an ability to be the void. I feel I've gone onto another rhythm. Okay, so what are we seeing? Okay, if the world was a superhero, what is the superhero doing? It's changing all the time. It's creating stuff all the time, right? So I would say it has an ability of a designer. It has an ability of a viewer. It has an ability to reset and continue from checkpoints, which is pretty much you wake up and you log back into the day again. So what I'm saying is, like, the world seems to be like, what is creativity? Creativity is like we are staring at a blank canvas until it's no longer blank. You're staring at your creatively mind. You're staying, like, let's say you're someone who thinks you're not creative. You're staring at that like empty space until at some point you realize you don't have thoughts. You don't have imagination. You're like an antenna, and there are rhythms in reality. And these rhythms, based on your attention, can speed up or slow down, or you can become so selfless that the only rhythm that you're going with is the world's karma. So you can actually become so selfless that you don't have a karma, and how the world happens is how you happen, right? Or you can be so selfish, and then how you happen, the world has to also accompany that, you know? In the Jewish tradition, when they speak about a sort of, I don't know, I guess a spiritual view on money, right, which I found this to be fascinating, was that some guy was asking this rabbi in this video, like, how do I make money? Like in a righteous, religious way. And the rabbi was saying that in some sense, there's this idea that the vessel you create suggests the miracles that are found. Right? So if let's say you're someone who's recently got married and you have like a kid and a wife, so it's as if you have created a vessel for 3 people. That means you're looking for a miracle for 3 people. That will satisfy the moment. Imagine you're someone and now you have a lot of children. Or imagine you're someone who has an orphanage, right? And you're maintaining like this orphanage or something, right? And you have like, hundreds of people to feed. It's as if you have created a vessel for that type of miracle, right? So it depends on your intent and what you feel you're authorized as a soul. And it depends on also what you want and what comes out of necessity. So what does this mean? It's another way of saying sometimes you see something and the brain's like, logically I desire this, oh yeah, and then there's other moments where you have not had the reasoning, the inner realm blueprints, but suddenly the idea comes out of nowhere. And most people, I think they don't notice that. I don't know, I mean, for me this was very a profound realization, mystical discovery, but I realized that in my inner realms, thoughts can move faster than how I think. And when they move faster than I think, I watch them. If I don't touch the inner realms and the rhythms moving very fast, it becomes a film. So you might not believe it, right? I'm pretty much imagine a dolphin just putting its head out of water, looking around, and then going back into the water. And pretty much I'm doing this, it's like I think in a blink of an eye constantly, like a dolphin jumping in and out of the water. In some sense, I'm seeing a reality, which is the inner realms, and I'm seeing a reality, which is the outer realms. So this world is behaving like this designer that doesn't know what it really wants to design, and that's why it has created within itself multiple designers. And there was a time where I looked at the sky and I'm like, God, you designed everything. So creation and designing from scratch or reinventing the wheel and all that. Design is a very sacred act. Because we're living in the designs that the past have given. This car, this cigarette I'm holding, this laptop, this watch, the clothing. These are all the efforts of human beings. These are the efforts of designers who were like, yo, this is cool, let me give it a try. And the world began taking shape. Alright guys. So, I guess that explains it. I'm pretty much saying, what is the ability of the world? The world is acting, it's treating itself like an invention, but it's also treating itself like the inventor. And it's kind of like space is eternally watching matter temporarily manifest and take form and shape. Can you imagine, Alright guys, let me see, what else is there? So I guess I'll talk about the wallpaper. So anybody who hasn't seen Chainsaw Man, I'm not advising you to see it because it's, it's kind of like a horror show. Like it's horror themed. But the 4th episode of this show was so beautiful, had such a beautiful ending, that if you can just get to the 4th episode, I would say it's enough, And so really, it's the reason it's a beautiful story. It's an effed up world, it's a messed up story, but in that messed up story, there's humans. And so this is what many people don't understand about the Japanese stories, a lot of these stories, these animes, is that they're constantly bringing it back to human values. They're showing you the dehumanized. They're showing dehumanized power, but then the evil person that doesn't care for the world loses. Have you noticed the bad guys are all those people that are disturbing, that are disrupting? Isn't that weird? Like sometimes I think like the Joker, he could have done all the stuff he did physically, or he could have just been a next level like negotiator and just talk to people, So what's really cool to understand is that even though things may appear that there's one way to do it, but there's actually many ways that life can happen, and the way I have been keeping myself like from being bored from my existence. You know, guys, I think, you know what? I think I'm gonna start anime, like metaphysical reviews of anime. Anime metaphysical reviews. You know, I gotta go find a group of people and then we react to anime. Really what it is storytelling is so crucial to the human experience. So guys, I'm going to end the talk. I'll be on Discord if, you know, people want to discuss things. Let me see what else is there to say. I've written, what if the world was a superhero? I mean, to be honest, before superheroes, I kind of feel like God, the idea of God was that like we are within a power that created the whole thing. I mean, think about religion. Right? They say everything started from God, everything returns to God. God is an inconceivable, uncreated state of being. I can't even say state of being because it's inconceivable, but it's a being. So do you understand? There's something that has never been born, that has never died, that is so powerful that it was so bored of being itself that it was like, yo, I don't have anybody to, in some sense, it was as if God was so alone that he was like, yo, I'm alone, but my creation doesn't have to be, and I will create beings that will teach me of the love that I can never have. And I'm not saying God is not all loving. God is all loving. But the thing about God is that it's a perfect being. And the point of creation is that it's your imperfections that are giving you purpose. So a perfect, eternal, uncreated being was like, yo man, I'm so perfect, what do I do? You know, it's like, yo, how do I experience imperfection? But I can't be imperfect because I'm a perfect being, so I'm going to create an imperfect world, and then there's going to be imperfect beings in that, and I'm going to learn about the love I cannot have because I am the absolute, do you know, from those who are not absolute. Do you understand? There's a reason God is watching man, not for the sake of man. That's the ego talking, where we think God has created us for only us. Do you know, before man sinned, God had created us for some reason, there was some intent, right? That means it was as if it was just a quality check. Like after human beings go to heaven, I think that's when the real intent, poetically God had for the invention of the human is, right? We just made a mistake, and it was like God's like, oh man, I gotta quality check my invention, do you know? Give it a reality check, right? And once the invention is checked, and imagine all those beings who suddenly made it to paradise, and they're like, yo, am I in paradise? And an angel was like, yeah, you are. But then the person's like, yo, is it done? Did I make it? Was I a good person? And the person was like, yeah man, you made it to heaven. But now the real game begins. The beings that are not afraid of their own presence, beings that entered this world of earth because at some point in their universal self they were convinced that they were ugly. Their souls were ugly. But that's the point of God, that your soul is not your soul. It is the eyes of those who created you. So now you may understand why religion, in some religions, the human being stares at this world and says, yo, it's so big, I don't know what to make of it. But if it has a creator, if it has an inconceivable authority, if the sky is watching the earth spin, then when you, in some sense, act, there's a moment of prayer. Like, to me, to be honest, there's moments where I go to pray and I forget the words, and it's just this feeling of intense fear, but not a fear of truth, a fear of how inferior have I been to, in some sense, try to shape that which shaped me. Do you see? It's like somebody, it's like an engineer trying to understand an engine and suddenly realizes the doubt of the engineer was wrong. And the purpose of it was to trust the engine. So, I guess we are the company of the eternal. When they said, in Vedic times they would say, what would they say? In Vedic times they would say, somebody asked this young kid, somebody went and asked this yogi, okay, old school, like a Gori yogi or something, some intense yogi, and the guy was like, yogi, and they were all taking soma in the video, and this kid says, hey yogi, what is truth? What is life? They're all like, a little elevated in the moment, and then the yogi looks at the kid and says, it's all the entertainment of the gods. And the guy said it so intensely, so directly. This like next level yogi said it to this guy, to this kid. And I'm not saying the yogi was enlightened, but what he said was, it left an impression. And for the longest time I was like, wait a minute. Is my audience the human beings and the world and the observable universe? What if my actual audience is not human? What if in the future these talks will carry on and they're not human? The human beings of then may act human, but they may not be human. Now we are very easily human. It's a blessed time to be alive. So what is the ability of the world? The ability of the world is you. You are the world's ability. If you fail, the world, technically the world failed. If you fail, technically the species failed. A part of it, So we're all looking for, some sort of victory on an individual level, but then the big profound realization, something the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas understood, that it's not an individual victory if you're not an individual being. This is why, to advance the civilization is how it's another way of saying the Bodhisattva says, why the world shouldn't be advanced. In certain traditions, there's some beings and some very advanced beings enter this world, and they're not here to enlighten. They're not here to enlighten beings. And some people are like, yo, why, man? It's like, are you telling me these next level beings from higher dimensions, they're coming down to earth, according to ancient books, and they're not enlightening people? Then what are they doing here? And I'll tell you what they're doing. They're not enlightening people because to them, they are not an individual being. The world is already enlightened. Enlightenment for the individual entity means abidance by the world's meaning, by the living world. So many people look at this world and it's lifeless to them. But we are the life in the room. And everything that enters the room of our mind can be imbued with life. Children take teddy bears and make those toys into like their best friends or whatever, right? And so human beings can take subjects and make it into their best friend. But the idea is, what is looking through your eyes? And Mr. Within's consideration is that we're raised and conditioned to be a known self in a known world, but actually we come to realize experientially and directly we are an unknown self in an unknown world, and the known life is a clue. So imagine this whole lifetime is like a clue for an unknown witnessing life force. And who says a life force has to be a person? All these people who are like, yo, in my past life, I was a baker, and then in my previous past life I was a king that liked bread, and the past life before that, I was a straw of hay, and the past life from that, I was, I don't know, the Big Bang's cousin, I think if Richard Dawkins was hearing this, he's like, did this guy just say the Big Bang's cousin? It's like, yo, nonsense! Somebody ring the nonsense alarm, it's like the scientist, went to the stand-up comedy show. The stand-up comedy comedian said a joke and a scientist was like, I can't laugh at that. It's, denying the laws of physics, nonsense. And the stand-up comedian's like, buddy, relax, how do you know your senses aren't nonsense, Nonsense literally means spiritual. It means something that is not sensory. It is not sensory limited. And so the cool thing about being human beings on Earth, we have been given the great performance. There was a time I'm like, yo, world, is some like transcendental agency or some force, has this, strange idea of like being this. Jesus Christ. I was like, yo, does some transcendental agency or the logos have this strange intent of like making me be like this, like, Batman figure of like the podcasting realm? Do you know what I'm saying? I was like, yo, logos, would you want to be Mr. Within in front of billions of people? And then the insight that came to me was that Mr. Within is not a noun. And the idea is, just like the martial arts saying goes, when the student is ready, the master appears. When a species is ready for an advanced civilization, poetically the cosmos sends a Mr. Within, which is a mirror. It's not an entity, it's a mirror. What that means is, the idea is that our life, the subject of ourself, thinks it owns. But what the subject of ourself owns is just the copy-paste version of reality. That means it owns perception. It doesn't own existence. Existence is not something that can be, believe it or not, owned if you're not a subject. It's language and subjects and ideas that are in some sense being the next, what's the term, echelon, the next, the organizational system. And so even in this scene in Chainsaw Man, I forget this girl's name, but she's a very unique character in the story, very, very free spirit. And there's a scene that this lady sacrifices herself. And when she's sacrificing herself, it's beautiful. Why? Because her last moment is for a value that she has been, man, I don't want to spoil it, but anyways. Wonder about the ability of your species, wonder about the ability of your universal sector, wonder about why all beings are here, wonder about why 8 billion physical creatures are stranded on a rock in the middle of, are stranded on a galactic island. Instead of ocean water, it's outer space and empty space. And so, just because some plants grew on this rock, human beings can in some sense inhabit it, right? So we really have to have an incredible honor for plants. Imagine they're like, aren't you vegetarian? Why do you eat meat? And the person's like, yo, you want me to eat, the sacred plants that are keeping us alive? I'm kidding, guys, though. Eat plants. But what it is that rather than even having the idea that we're eating plants, is that we are introducing energy to our own advanced energetic system. So when I eat a food, it's like that energy is coming into the authorization of my free will, which is controlling my body. There's this English thing where they say like, hello, governor, but the governor is your free will, Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll be on Discord for, I guess, a little bit. And then share, subscribe, comment, like, and I hope this episode was interesting. Much blessings. Namaste. Rise, mankind, rise.